Good afternoon and good morning to those of you ringing in from North American markets. Very exciting to be here talking about our top 10 procurement trends to watch in 2026 and beyond. Hello to everybody that is out there. Sam Jenks here, CRO and SRM expert, Procure Tech fan and pro, and the let's say coordinator of today's session, your guide for the procurement trends of 2026 and beyond. I think that trends webinars are always interesting sessions, right? Because we make predictions for the future. The question is, the future, is it going to do what we say or not? I think that this year showed us that we absolutely have a pretty tough time being able to match trends with reality, albeit it's exciting that we have the opportunity to be able to look forward at 2026 today together. I will be getting into the day's content in just a moment's time. I would like everybody to be able to take a second to feed into the chat. You can see the chat by simply having that extended there to be able to talk at any point in time in the public chat with other attendees. Equally that so, you could be able to also ask questions during the session. Beautiful thing is that we're going to have a Q&A and they can be able to be marked as questions. So if a question comes up during the day session, you don't need to wait until the Q&A. You can simply be able to pop it into the chat when the question comes up, and then we're going to be able to mark that and, of course, display for everybody in attendance when the question and answer session comes at the end of today's webinar. I would love everybody to be able to start heating up the chat by just quickly typing in, where are you calling in from? It's always fun to be able to understand what time zones and locations we have. I'll kick it off. I'm calling in myself from Stockholm, Sweden. Very soon relocating myself back to the States. I'll be very soon hosting these sessions in the morning in Boston. Christine from Michigan, Doug in Rochester, Mary in Florida, Cambridge, UK, Rhode Island, Netherlands, Rome, Italy, Singapore, very exciting. UK, Germany, Lübeck, Germany. Lübeck, I'm familiar with that, where that is. I'll have to Google Maps that one later. Cumbria, Switzerland, awesome. So a healthy mix of people in Europe as well as in North America. Peter calling in from Singapore. Good evening to you, Peter. All right, fantastic. David, Newcastle. Newcastle Brown is never a bad order. Fantastic. Then let's get into the day's content. Thank you guys for heating up the chat. Again, if you have any questions during today's session, just feel free to drop those in the chat. We'll be able to get around to them because they'll be able to be marked as questions during the day's session, so you won't have to wait and potentially then forget your questions. To also keep your eye out for is going to be polls. We're going to be launching a poll or two during today's session, so make sure that you keep your eyes peeled when those come up and keep your voting fingers ready. Let's then get into the day's agenda. Here we then see the agenda for today. We're going to start off by taking a brief look at Kodiak at a glance. The session today is absolutely not about us, but we're going to then directly transition into the core of today's session, which is reflecting on the 2025 trends, which of those really trended. We're going to then talk very briefly about the state of the union in procurement today, as well as then that we're going to get into the meat and potatoes for today's session, which is, of course, the trends to watch in 2026. We're also going to offer up a quick tip 5-step plan to turn those trends into action. But the bulk of today's session, which I believe the runtime will probably be around 40 to 45 minutes, leading up until the Q&A, which will be probably 5 to 10 minutes of session. It depends really about, I guess, how quickly we talk and get through today's content. Without further ado, then, let's take a quick glance at Kodiak Hub. Kodiak Hub is a supplier management solution with a team that is global. We are based and headquartered out of Stockholm, Sweden, albeit we have customers based throughout the Nordics, UK, DACH region, and the United States. We have a customer base that we love and a suite that many of them love, and they also rave about it. We've had a plethora of accolades, and you can go and check us out and learn more about Kodiak via Capterra, G2, Spend Matters, and other resources. Rather than me telling you more about that, it's best that you hear some of the social proof that's out there in the market about what our customers think about our solution as well. The solution itself that they love and rave about is a modular one. You can see on screen here. The platform is really broken down into three primary pillars. The primary solution, which is the hub, this sits at the core of the platform. This is your single source of truth for supplier data, documentation, information, and collaboration. So there's a space there for being able to really automate and manage complex workflows and communication externally, but also internally in the business. There's the opportunity there, of course, to also have visualization capabilities for analytics and alike. The rest of the solution is really broken down into two main pillars that you see, the left and the right of the solution, which is the hub. This is then your automation capabilities for risk screening, third-party risk management from a perspective of country risk, sanctions, financials, and media monitoring. The right-hand side of the screen is all about orchestrating the processes that many of you are probably already doing today, but maybe don't have under one hood or within one hub. These particular modules are focused on lifecycle management, more so from kind of the beginning of the relationship and lifecycle of that supplier, where it comes to registration and intake, through to onboarding and assessment, audits, and performance evaluation. Really tying together the aspects surrounding the relationship management and lifecycle management of vendor, all the way from intake to third-party risk management, all the way through to managing the lifecycle and performance of that particular vendor. And we work with some awesome customers today, some of those that are in attendance, and thank you for your trust and always your partnership here. We love to work with the world-class procurement teams that we are working with. I think the one thing that all of our customers have in common, they all have global complex supply chains where quality is critical and speed matters, and also have a high focus on creating sustainable but also strategic supplier relationships, and therefore they turn to Kodiak as a partner to be able to do so. Before we get into the day's content, I wanted to take a moment to be able to reflect on the trends of last year that we shared with everybody. Procurement trends of 2025 are as what was seen on screen here, and you guys can, if you're interested in seeing how well these line up, of course, with the trends that actually took place, can make sure to be able to go back and watch this particular webinar recording if it's of interest to you, albeit the primary topics that we discussed last year were surrounding, of course, the buzzword of all buzzwords, the item in technology that nobody could be able to deny, I think, in 2025, which is AI and the applications of generative AI. And I think that this is going to continue to proliferate this year. It's still on our list of trends, which we're going to get into, of course, in a particular format as well. I do think that agentic AI is going to be one of those things that, of course, is continuing to be tested. Some of the other trends that we saw was having a strong foundation for data, of course, particularly with the proliferation of AI. Then, of course, a strong foundation of supplier information data is important to be able to have that single source of truth to actually be able to make use of artificial intelligence. Some of the other aspects that, of course, were big last year, well, the legislative tsunami that had hit, right? Back in 2023, 2024, ESG was on the tip of everybody's tongues. Now, the question is that still the case? There was also a lot of talk last year about elements surrounding a shift to strategic, how, of course, collaboration was going to be able to deepen in markets with vendors, as well as then also the kind of reemergence of category management as well. I think what we saw was that there was a few of these particular trends that really not only stuck around, but also trended pretty hard back in 2025. The primary ones being, of course, related to technology, AI, data, user centricity, really focusing on, of course, the experience that a user has as well as the supplier has when interacting with technology and procurement. One of the elements that we've seen stick around, which is also on this year's list, is elements related to deglobalization and how it's reshaping and shifting the way that businesses work with resilience and agility in their sourcing to ensure that they have really resilient lines of supply. And what that means, of course, to bring supply chains closer to home for us working within the procurement field. Cost is king. There is absolutely no doubt about that. And that is still sticking around, as well as then the shift to strategic. I think that with the emergence of AI, it aligns very nicely, of course, right? The ability to be able to remove low value tasks and have more time for strategic tasks. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that today as it's going to continue on within 2026. And we believe beyond as well. This is kind of the new normal for us within procurement. So without any further ado, let's get into the top 10 trends to watch within procurement in 2026. And I wanted to be able to take a moment before we share those trends to just set the scene. From a popular culture perspective, of course, it was an interesting year. Coldplay exposed the CEO and the love affair of that CEO with their head of HR. That was a interesting TikTok phenomenon. I'm not sure if it came across your guys' radar. LeBron James and Bronny James become a father-son duo to get on the court together. Very exciting. Sydney Sweeney broke the internet with her questionable appearances in the American Eagle. Jeans are jeans, or good jeans adverts, which of course was breaking a lot of people's, I would say, tempers, and also the the trolls were really out on that one. Taylor and, of course, Travis Kelce got engaged. Big news for all of those NFL fans out there. Maybe not so big news for those that aren't interested. And then, of course, the sad news, of course, of the Louvre getting broken into with what looked like kind of your everyday, I would say, ladder system. One would hope that the Louvre will improve upon some of their security systems. What did all of these things show us? Well, they showed us that it's a VUCA market. Jokes aside, what we did see this particular past year is that there is a lot of vulnerability, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity within the market. We saw this in highs and lows out there in the public markets. We've seen this in the administration, particularly in the United States, ways that they are navigating their time in office, the bills that are being passed. We see this, of course, in the geopolitical strife that's been ongoing in the Middle East, as well as then in Eastern Europe. There is a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of complexity and a lot of ambiguity going on. And I think that this trickles into supply chain and procurement in a very substantial way, right? I think that it makes the lives of procurement professionals far beyond the traditional roles. Risk management and cost reduction and savings, this isn't the only thing that procurement needs to worry about anymore, right? We need to focus on how do we put up with disruptions and geopolitical turbulence? How do we make sure that we stay on top of these regulation and compliance requirements on transparency? How do we innovate and really impact our top line with driving performance of our greatest asset, which is our supplier base, in times where things are turbulent, when the market is really complex and vulnerable? I think that the expectation on procurement, supply chain, while it's on the tip of every CEO's tongue, which is fantastic, it's exactly what we've been asking for, it also has come with a new requirement, right? You don't need to just get a good supplier at the right cost within a risk-averse supply chain. We want to have the right thing at the right cost, right level of quality in a risk-averse supply chain, sourced within an agile supply chain, which you can map down to the nth tier, ensuring that it's sustainably produced. And oh, by the way, make sure also that we can be able to have a secure line of supply ongoing. I think these particular expectations are just going to continue to surmount, and it's exactly why we need to try and figure out how we can navigate this new landscape, particularly also to remove low-value tasks from our day-to-day. One of the primary trends that we're going to dig into today is one that has been around for a while, and I don't think we're going to see going anywhere. And it's exactly why we're going to kick off with trend number one, which is cost savings. I hear it at pretty much every single event that I go to. Procurement is really getting back to basics. The basics of the role, the focus on being able to create savings is one that is not going anywhere. What are the reasons? Well, because people are simplifying their lives. Procurement is a function that is there to save money first and minimize risk second. And I think that the expectations are now growing on the role to be able to make money. And every business, when things get tough, are going to ask themselves these three questions. How can I help my organization to be able to make money, save money, and minimize risk? What we saw in the Hackett study, which is the procurement agenda key issue study. This is a really great study. If you're not familiar with this one, I would suggest that you go and check it out. They publish this every single year. And we have a podcast episode actually where we hosted Chris Sawchuk, who is one of their lead analysts within the space of procurement and supply chain. And the really interesting thing here is that they've been releasing this same exact study, and I believe it was over 20 years, at least 15 years. And during the time in which they go around to CPOs, they always ask, kind of these top 10, what has changed and, what is really the top priority. And what Chris said to me in that podcast episode is that it's always very hard for CPOs to be able to say which particular priority is the top because they're all priorities, right? With that being said, going into 2025, they took a pulse of the market at the tail end of 2024. And you see on the left-hand side of the screen here what the feedback was from the market. Number one and number two being improving spend, cost reduction, of course, focus on savings, as well as then that continuity, right? Again, agility in the supply chain. What you also see, though, is that there was a lot of movement within the other areas, which we're going to come back to, which became very, very interesting. The reason why? Volatility, ambiguity, complexity. What Hackett saw is what everybody was seeing. 2025 was a year that was really like no other before, right? They, for the very first time ever, did a pulse check update in Q2 of 2025. After 15 to 20 years of releasing this particular study, it was the first time that they felt compelled to go back out to market and understand how are things evolving. With that being said, what held true? Savings were still in focus. And what do we see, of course, from 2026? Well, savings, supply continuity, these remain the exact same top priorities for procurement leaders across the board. Leading into the second trend that we believe is going to proliferate in 2026, the reduction of maverick spend. And I know that many people are probably thinking to themselves, well, we're always trying to reduce maverick spend. This is always on our trend list. And maybe that is the case. But hang with me here. I think that there's a shift underway. We're moving in spend management beyond spend insights or spend analysis and analytics, business intelligence, to a perspective where we are trying to understand how we get more spend under management. This is a terminology on the tip of everybody's tongues right now. How do we understand the total spend managed by procurement divided by our total organizational spend to be able to really understand what we have our arms around within procurement? And I think that the shift is going to come in not just trying to understand our categories and splits of spend, but starting to try and act on the process. The fact is, maverick spend is not a case of bad stakeholders. People don't want in any way, shape, or form to spend in, I would say, non-compliance or non-governed ways. It's not their intention to spend money or waste money. The intentions are typically good. What it typically is a sign of is bad process. And I think that that's the shift that we're going to see. The primary shift is going to be in a tightening of organizations on their focus and their processes related to requisition, to onboarding and due diligence, and to qualification of the vendor base. This is just a visualization of how some of our customers are helping their teams to be able to build better process, create more autonomy and also automation within those processes, but to also be able to make sure that there is a flow that can stand the test of time to reduce rogue spend. Rather than focusing on the analysis, they're focusing on fixing the process. This process is a simple 3-step one, as you see on screen here. And of course, there's intricacies to this. But of course, this is how a lot of our customers are making sure that they can reduce Maverick spend. By, of course, dealing with intake of business stakeholders, making those initial requests so that procurement is in the loop from day one, automating the onboarding and SAQs so that the vendor has a good experience, ensuring also that we remove the low-value tasks that are associated with requests for onboarding and due diligence and the chase of the vendor. Being able to also then have an automated rating methodology to see where a vendor is doing well or doing poorly so that we can quickly move them through a qualification process, ultimately to be able to trigger the approval and qualification workflows as well. So let's look at this equation really quickly. If you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't think that the process is really going to help anything, right? Or Maverick spend isn't really that big of an issue. Check this out here. In this particular scenario, the total spend of a business would be 500 million US dollars. One could then probably guess that the tail spend is somewhere around 10% of their total spend. It might be slightly smaller than that, right? Across a large number of smaller non-strategic vendors, right? Typically, these vendors are not being managed due to annual admin or low visibility. And there's a high likelihood that there's some opportunities for consolidation here, but of course, the rogue purchases fragments the vendor base more and more. Now, look on the right-hand side. This is a conservative figure, taking the savings potential of just 3 to 5%. Should you be able to get more of that spend under management, get your arms around that spend before it goes out the door and the PO is cut. If the addressable tail spend is 50 million, with a savings potential of just 3 to 5%, that means that 3 to 5 of 100 purchases that are happening with rogue spend just keep procurement in the loop. There's directly is an opportunity of 1.5 to 2.5 million US dollars in annual savings, hard savings, savings that come from the opportunity for procurement to say, we already have a contract here, we have a frame agreement, let me help you on that negotiation. We actually can't collaborate with this particular supplier and alike. These are all things that, of course, procurement often says they get involved too late. It's not the intention of people to be bad stakeholders. It's typically a sign of bad process. And I think that, again, the shift is going to focus, or the focus is going to shift, from spend analysis to getting spend under management and fixing that process as well. Heading into trend number 3, AI. You didn't think we were going to talk about trends without talking about AI. What do we know? Well, we know from another study by the Hackett Group, which was also from the Procurement Agenda and Key Issue Study. This particular focus was about the gap in FTEs to the jobs to be done. What do we see on the left-hand side of this is that the total workload volume expected and projected by procurement leaders from 2024 into 2025 was to be a 10% increase. And maybe you guys are feeling this. I know that, our teams in our sales organization are feeling this. I know that the majority of our customers that we talk to are feeling this. They just don't have enough time in their day to do the jobs that they have in front of them. Why? Is because the productivity gap has also grown with the jobs to be done. What is required to be able to close that gap? Well, it's the application of technology. Unfortunately, what we saw is that the expectation and projected increase in technology spend was potentially only going to be about 6% of total technology spend. Maybe not enough to be able to close that particular gap. AI and the focus of being piloting AI to moving to an AI native team is going to be absolutely necessary to close this particular efficiency gap as well. And what I think that a lot of organizations saw during this mid pulse update in the updated figures by Hacker Group in Q2 is that Gen AI rose the ranks. What do we see in this particular visualization is that Gen AI was in spot number 8 heading into 2025. In just 6 months' time, not even 6 months' time, this leapfrogged as an initiative in organizations from number 8 to number 2. The development and the impact of AI, generative AI particularly, and the pilots that people have been doing have grown exponentially. I see it in our organization, and I'm sure that you guys see it in yours as well. The fact is, if you don't, then you might be lagging behind. This is a trend that will remain absolutely true in 2026. And in fact, it was number 3 on the list of priorities for procurement in 2026, as per the updated Hacker Group Key Issues and Agenda study. So what do we mean by AI native? Because I think that there's a lot of terminology that gets thrown around. AI powered, AI enabled, and AI whatever. The issue is that we start to have AI apathy, I think, right? We stop caring so much when we continue to hear the same term over and over again. So what do we really mean by AI native? Well, I think it's important that we break this down into 2 main categories. And you could have a third category here, which is AI native technology, being that it's technology built with AI at the core, rather as an application of technology that is then embedded into the solution. An AI native person, an AI native team is really kind of no different, right? It's AI at the core. An AI native person is somebody that uses tools proactively as the default. Any problem that comes up, you think, how can AI solve this, right? Whether it's a routine task or something that you're struggling with, time consuming or not, your mindset goes to that first item of how can AI be able to improve the speed, quality, and decision making in this particular task. An AI native team, that's a team that, of course, does similar things to the individual contributor level. It's a team that, of course, not only focuses on how they can apply AI, but also how they can measure true productivity gains from investing time and also effort in using AI, and also how quickly they're able to adapt with change. An AI native team is a must, but another must is a culture shift. Because I think that in procurement, we're a function that is focused on managing risk, and therefore our teams are risk averse, which is great in certain contexts. But I think that a lot of us probably in this session today struggle with this concept. A concept that has been around in the space of software as a service, that an industry that I'm within myself for a very long time. I think it's hard for procurement organizations to be able to adopt. Why? Is because they're there to save, not to be able to spend. You're not there to be able to have experimental spend, right? You're not there to be able to fail. You're there to be able to execute and create reductions in costs. With that being said, I think that there's a culture shift coming, particularly in businesses that want to proliferate within the space of AI. I heard a speaker at a recent event talk about the fact that we're living in dog years. And I introduced in one of our recent webinars on buy versus build as well. And you might be thinking to yourself, what do you mean by dog years? Well, I think that we all know the concept of that. 1 dog year is equal to 7 human years, right? So when a dog is 2 years old, they're 14 years old. When they're 7 years old, they're 49 years old in human years, so forth and so on. The interesting thing is that when you look at dog years, it's actually only aligned. The concept of 7 times 7 meets only at 7 dog years, where the dog is then assumed to be 49 human years. the first 2 years of that dog's life is actually more like 12 years per human year. They're assumed to be about 24, in fact, when they're 2 years old. And their first year of life is actually like them growing up into a 16-year-old girl or boy. That's probably why they're such a pain in the behind as well. My dog is actually sitting here next to me on the couch, and thank God he's 9 years old. So he's pretty tired at this point because Charlie otherwise can be pretty opinionated. I think that what we're seeing is that this age of software as a service and AI, failing fast is necessary. Why? Is because waiting 6 human months in the age of SaaS and AI is like waiting 10 years in technology years. I think that you could align AI years and technology years with dog years in this particular concept. Look at it, right? 2024 was the year of understanding AI. 2025, we were using AI. We stopped wondering, how does it work? And we just started using it, right? We're becoming AI native. And now we're in the era of scaling AI. I think that this is only going to continue to proliferate. And really, the people that will lose out in this upcoming year aren't going to be the ones that fail fast. It's going to be the ones that do absolutely nothing and watch from the sidelines. This brings upon another trend, trend number 5, which is a new era of build versus buy 2.0. And equally so, one could actually call this particular era buy versus buy. And that's why I think that it's a new era within itself. What do we mean by build versus buy? Well, build, of course, we're talking typically today not about something that is going to be fully engineered in-house. And therefore, I mean the concept of buy versus buy, right? Because any type of internal engineering is probably going to utilize some type of out-of-the-box existing web app, some low-code or AI-assisted capabilities, or some type of a customization or configuration of an existing solution, a CRM, an ERP, something of the sort, right? Whether that be Excel, SharePoint, your Microsoft Business Cloud, or like, right? Buy, I think that that's, when you go out to market, it's out of the box, pre-built capabilities. In its context, of course, of SRM or procurement technology, this typically means that it has some type of connectors to your ERP or P2P. And of course, it's then a solution that is managed by the software as a service provider, right? It is something that has a continuous development and releases that is not reliant upon an IT team to be able to continue to build out. And I think that what we're going into is, of course, the continued questioning by the organization, because the fact is, technology is becoming more and more commoditized when we look at AI. With that being said, is it really working within businesses? We're going to dig into that in just a moment. But first, I would like to open up here, right? The question is, has anybody experienced this? It's a rhetorical question. We don't have a poll on this particular item, but I assume that some people in attendance here has heard somebody question the opportunity to go out to market and find technology because we could just build with our Microsoft Power Apps. It works perfectly fine. With that being said, I think that the era of build, albeit the application of AI can be proliferated and different types of tests can be made, building is still building. And building can stall before you even get started. This is a highlighted timeline, and this is even a conservative timeline of what a typical build looks like, aligned with the industry standards for IT-driven projects. Scoping typically takes about 1 month, and then of course it typically goes into an approval cycle, which is anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks, especially in regulated industries. Very important to make sure that things are going to be to scope and to spec. IT typically has a backlog of anywhere from 4 to 7 months. So when it comes down to it, it's about a year and a half down the road before development gets started. And Then, of course, there's fixes and go live and hypercare following. So if you make a decision on what you want to build in January of this upcoming year, well, in dog years, of course, you're going to be about 24 years behind on the technology once it's released. This is something for us to be able to keep in mind when we look at the equation of build versus buy, and exactly why it's important that we recognize that, of course, the AI divide is growing. This is actually from an MIT study by Nanda, which is their generative AI arm, which does a lot of pilots and programs and studies a lot of pilot programs within different types of global enterprises. What they found in their studies is that of the, I think it was over 150 different organizations, all kind of 100 million plus enterprises that they looked into, only 5% of these enterprises that had AI pilots were able to say that they had any type of measurable impact. And it typically, again, wasn't the fact that people weren't adopting. There was AI native teams. It was that the builds were too slow internally and the projects got exited. So what works? Going out to market and getting AI. Internal builds, unfortunately, succeed less often. But the fact is like this, not adopting AI early enough, having this paralysis by analysis of what you're going to do, again, the only losers of the AI era are going to be those that do nothing. I heard Yannick Thierry of Bain & Company say this at an event recently, which I love so much. The best time to start your AI adoption is yesterday. The second best time is today. Let's make sure that, of course, you speed up so that you're not looking 24 human years in the future, which would be, of course, those 2 technology years at solution that is outdated. Moving into trend number 6, the strategic work of procurement is getting more and more important. We are moving up the value chain in organizations. The removal of low value tasks is going to happen more and more as AI continues to be able to go into our everyday lives and our teams become more and more AI native. And what do we mean by low value tasks? Well, I'm sure that you guys are feeling some of these on a day-to-day basis, right? It's that manual data entry. It's that chasing of vendors. That's those repetitive tasks that otherwise could have some type of robotic process automation. And what is that hindering you from doing? Well, it's hindering you from your value add tasks, the things that can be able to drive forward strategic alignment with your suppliers. For you to be able to model, of course, or dive deeper into, category or sourcing strategy and analysis. The opportunities to be able to influence the business and partner with the business in a more strategic manner. These are the things that, of course, one will have more time for the more we determine to remove low value tasks. And how is one going to get there? Well, the focus, again, is to try and formulate a pathway where the organization is removing low value tasks and operational work and upskilling the individuals that one continues to have in a business. This is a Bain & Company visualization that we've adapted here, but it is originally the Bain & Company model. The focus here is to be able to, of course, over time, mature an organization and therefore reduce headcount while still being able to increase the value delivered to the end organization across the enterprise. How? Of course, again, by adopting more technology, which then, of course, will be able to automate and augment low value tasks that are operational, that are, of course, bogging your team down from being able to be growth enablers and a strategic platform for the business. So what is this going to mean for the day-to-day? I thought that this was another very fun Bain & Company visualization. The day in the life of Max, the category manager. And what did Max's day used to look like? Well, Max would wake up and get into the office, and Max would then have to compare and contrast RFP responses and then align with the stakeholders internally and attend another call with legal or commercial elements and then create a new RFP document that integrated the various stakeholders' inputs, while, of course, having to eat her lunch at her desk. She then had the opportunity to create her report for management on the contract performance by the end of the day, and there was the 8 to 9 hour day gone. Now, what's filling the day to day? Well, again, an AI native team will allow Max to be able to have a lot more time back to not only create an RFP, to capture, of course, that intake from the internal stakeholders, but also to launch that RFP as well, all while enjoying some coffee with her colleague just within 1 hour's time. What does this mean? Well, she's going to have a lot more time back for value adding activities that fit within the day. And I know that this is just a cheeky visualization, but it gives a overview, of course, of the type of value that AI can be able to augment work and, of course, give back time for value adding activities that fit within a day as well. Moving on to the next trend, which is trend number 7, embedded ESG and third-party risk management. And I think that this is the most important element here, is not just ESG and third-party risk management as a standalone, but that they are, in fact, embedded. If we look at the top priorities heading into 2026, this remains in the top 10 priorities for procurement organizations at number 7. Strengthening third-party risk management, visibility, and capability. Now, all the while, I think that it's important to understand how we actually get value out of third-party risk management, because this is a concept, a topic, a technology area that a lot of organizations are grappling with right now. How do they get the most value out of their third-party risk management? Well, I can tell you, in the legacy source to pay view, this requires a little bit of a mindset shift of teams, right? SRM, including, of course, risk management and third-party risk management, in a lot of elements, of course, also ESG, or at least corporate sustainability reporting and different types of compliance surrounding ESG. This is seen as kind of a subset of the source to contract process, a particular element that is embedded within the broader S2C. The way that we at Kodiak Hub see supplier relationship management and third-party risk management is more so in an end-to-end process, equal to the end-to-end processes that are, of course, being managed within the ERP. There is no start or end to third-party risk management. It is a continuous life cycle approach that is equal to the elements that are within your ERP, right? Or within your broader SRM, or within your S2P. It does not start and stop of your monitoring of third-party risks. There needs to be an approach that, of course, is a life cycle approach. At Kodiak, we see that embedding this into the relationship management is the easiest way to be able to do it, not looking at it as a separate task. In essence, kind of two different camps here. Those that, as we say, tell the time, whereas Kodiak is looking to build the clock. A snapshot of a vendor's risk is not third-party risk management. A credit report or a sanction screening or a cyber risk review that is singular within its results is not third-party risk management. Third-party risk management requires third-party risk monitoring, and it requires a triaged view of that particular vendor's risk, not just focused on what the market says about this particular vendor or what their credit rating is or what is going on within media in their reputational risk. Risk can also be related back to their operational risk or their ability to actually be able to deliver, or the context in which they're situated, or their ability to be able to engage or collaborate with you, or their availability of particular documentation that is important, and much more. Risk is something that is not singular to a point in time. It is, of course, a life cycle approach, and therefore we believe that an embedded third-party risk management approach is going to be the one that a lot more businesses start to adopt within this upcoming year. Equal to that, Within the technology space, we believe that there's going to be a source to pay consolidation. I think that this is something that has been a long time coming. We see a lot of the acquisitions that have happened within the space this particular year. Certuo, for example, getting acquired by Coupa. There has been some other major acquisitions within the space. I think that we're going to continue to see that, but what I think we're going to see more than anything is that businesses get a bit more savvy in the way that they want to be able to build up their architectures of their procurement systems and ecosystems. If we show this end-to-end process map again, what we can see is that there is a lot of things within the source to pay focus to be able to keep an eye on in strategy of sourcing, in source to contract and purchase to pay, in SRM and TPRM. What I think we're going to start seeing is architectures that look a little bit more like this. And this is just, again, a model that's been inspired by our friends from Archlit. Shout out to Lucas and Tim for the inspiration of this. The focus here is really that businesses need to be able to cover their overall goals within areas with best of breed providers so that they're not, of course, in any way, shape, or form utilizing a one of all solution or suite that is not going to actually cover the depth in which they need to cover within an area, whether it be sourcing strategy, source to contract, purchase to pay, SRM, or TPRM. I would say that within TPRM, it's one of the areas that businesses are going to continue to have the largest network of monitoring systems and inputs. With that being said, I think that a lot of these companies are going to start being more deeply integrated, not only into SRM providers, but into source to pay providers. Kodiak ourselves already has a lot of out of the box integrations with many of these providers, as well as then we, of course, integrate upwards towards solutions in source to contract or source to pay equal to the ERP. And I think that the open data architectures and API architectures are going to become much more simplified in the coming year as well. What is the ways that, of course, Kodiak typically sits in the ecosystem, and most modern SRM solutions sit in an ecosystem? There is, of course, a transfer, whether that be single directional or bi-directional data between an ERP and or a data lake with Kodiak. We capture, of course, not only that in-company proprietary data as a, how I say, foundation to the supplier information management, but also utilize qualitative data and input from suppliers and internal stakeholders equal as well. Equally, third-party risk data and different types of market insights are fed into the solution, whether those be things that our customers bring along with them or are licensed directly via us. And I think that these types of ecosystems are going to continue to grow within broader procurement space and industry as businesses start to simplify within their overall source to pay. Moving into the next trend, the maturity in the space of SRM. I was having a conversation the other day with Simon Frost from Procurement Adventurer, and he said, SRM is a weird space. It's one of those spaces that doesn't really have bookends, right? It doesn't really have a start or a finish. And a lot of market players have a tough time being able to say exactly how they're delivering value in the space or exactly what their position is in the market. I think that Kodiak, of course, in our way, is trying to define what SRM really means or world-class SRM means. And I think that our customers are seeing that as well. But I think that the maturity in global procurement organizations is also growing alongside of that. I think that a lot of people are asking themselves right now, how do I actually know if I'm ready for SRM? Or when is just a homegrown system good enough to be able to do the job that I need to do? What I would love to be able to understand here is there people in attendance, where are you guys at in your particular journey of supplier relationship management systems at the moment? Are you currently just kind of gaining an understanding out there? Are you building momentum internally? Are you actively looking for a solution? There's a poll launched now, so please take a moment to be able to answer on that particular poll. All right, so we see only 10 votes. There's 55 people in attendance. Be great if we can continue to get some more votes here. We're going to keep the poll up for a few more moments. Go ahead and vote when you have a second. And 3, 2, all right. We're going to stop the poll there. Well, what do we see is that the poll results, most individuals in attendance here, it's actually a blend. Currently, there's about 30% of people that had responded there that are actively looking for an SRM solution, 15% that have already matured and adopted something, 15% that are, of course, getting that momentum internally, and 38% that are out there gaining and understanding. And I think that this shows, again, the varied levels of SRM maturity, albeit some of our prior sessions, there is a lot more people in that stages of just gaining an understanding or building momentum internally. So therefore, we're already starting to see the maturity growing within the space of SRM. And I think this is just going to continue into 2026 as well. What we have for those of you that are in the selection phase is an easy framework. And we're going to share this document following the session as well, or the opportunity to download the document. This is a decision-making framework that we built up where you can be able to side by side determine, is homegrown good enough for me? Or is SRM absolutely essential for me to be able to go and adopt a solution out there in the market? We have a, how do I say, guideline for those of you that are in market, and that's to be able to use the rule of 6 of 9. If you need to be able to fill out 6 of the 9 areas on the right-hand side, well, then SRM might be essential for you. Heading into the last trend of today's session, becoming the customer of choice. Now, I know there's been a lot of talk about procurement becoming the customer of choice for a long time, but what do we really mean by that? Well, in the 2020s, this has been a decade already of disruption, right? I don't need to tell you exactly what's been going on. I think that we've all been living it well enough, but it's been a tough few years. And what does it mean? Well, it means that a lot of businesses are looking at an age now of deglobalization, a reconfiguration, a reimagination of their supply chains, which is being accelerated by geopolitical turmoil following things that have happened during COVID. What does this mean? Well, the CEOs and COOs that are having an opinion on these particular items, in that boardroom, in that C-suite, they want supply chains closer to home. This is a statistic from Bain & Company. The majority of CEOs and COOs are planning to bring their supply chains closer to home, and they're relying on you guys in procurement and sourcing functions to be able to do so. And we all know that the procurement function gets a lot of its value, innovation, and performance via our external partners and suppliers. This makes the contribution of a business incredibly reliant upon the performance of those suppliers and partner networks, right? So what does that mean? We need to make sure that, of course, we're harnessing those relationships and being the customer of choice, because when times get tough or when we're trying to be more agile in our sourcing, we need to be able to make sure that we are there to be able to deliver upon that bringing home of those supply chains. So now we have the 10 trends, and this is a little cheat sheet here for everybody in attendance of how it is that we can be able to start bringing these trends into an actionable roadmap. I thought it was a quite nice little cheat sheet. If you're interested in, of course, trying to build a more AI native team or increase your strategic leverage in the business or grow your SRM maturity, well, pick 2 or 3 must wins. Don't start with all 10 of them. Map out your current maturity. Define sprints, whether that be 30, 60, 90 days. Assign clear change owners in the business so that it's not everyone's job, but you have distinct individuals that are responsible, and co-create out in the business as well so that these things actually stick within your organization. With that being said, I want to thank everybody for their attendance, but I also have one last poll before we get into the Q&A. The poll here on screen is then which particular trend did you feel like will have the biggest impact within 2026? Take a moment to be able to answer the poll that is on screen now. Curious to understand which trend do you think is going to have the biggest impact in procurement in 2026 of those that we have just provided? Only a few votes so far. Take a moment to be able to vote if you are able to do so. There, the votes are starting to pile in. It's a pretty healthy split, but it looks like the majority of people are saying cost savings. Cost is king. I'm not surprised by that. And that AI pilots to AI native is a very close second to that, which I'm also not surprised by. And three, two, one, we're going to then stop the poll. 45% of people in attendance said cost savings. So not a surprise there. And a lot of people are looking to make teams more AI native, which is, I think, a lot of people's ambitions right now in the market. So thank you for taking the time to be able to sit in. Thank you for taking the time to be able to share as well. And I would like to now be able to shift over to a section of a Q&A. We do only have a tight 5 minutes as the session is ending at the top of the hour. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop those into the chat line now. If you would like to be able to learn more about Kodiak Hub, you could be able to feel free and book a demonstration of the solution. There is a button on screen right now to be able to do so. Feel free to be able to go ahead and learn more about our SRM solution, particularly if you're in that phase of selecting an SRM vendor or if you're trying to educate yourself on what's out there in the market. But we'll wait just one moment then to see if there's any questions. Thank you, Rachel, as well. So I do see one particular question here by Beiruz. What exactly is meant by spend under management? So simply put, it's the amount of spend driven divided by the total spend, excuse me, in the business that procurement really has their arms around, where they're in the loop and there's control over that particular spend. So it's as simple as that. And I think that this gives us an understanding, of course, of where it is that procurement needs to be able to make an impact. But again, it's a focus on, well, where is the problem? Is it actually then on the process itself, or is it on, for example, the categorization of that spend? All right. Well, then, if that's all the questions for today, I'm going to also then launch now the other CTA, which is that you guys can feel free to download the slides from today's webinar. If you wanted to get those slides, just go ahead and click on the button there, and you're going to be able to get brought directly to those particular slides for download as well. If there's no last questions, then we'll end the session for today. And I want to then say that I appreciate everybody's time. Hope then that you're going to be able to take on these trends with vigor and also 2026. Enjoy your holidays, the new year, and see you on the other side as well when we host our next webinar to start off 2026. Thank you very much.